Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We've got a really good turnout. We've got over 40 people in the room, so really happy to have you here. Maybe the poor weather on the coast is contributing to folks wanting to be inside, but really glad to be here tonight. So my name is Margaret, and I am the coordinator for Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Oregon's marine reserves and Cape Falcon Marine Reserve before we get started with our main program. So, Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve works to create awareness and understanding of Oregon's marine reserves, in particular the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve, which includes this beautiful place on your screen right now, the short sand beach at Oswald West State Park. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife oversees the 5 marine reserves that are located off of the Oregon coast, and most of these also include marine protected areas. These were established between 2012 and 2016 from legislation, and they are located in Oregon's territorial waters, which go out 3 miles from shore. Marine reserves in Oregon were created with 3 goals. Those are to conserve marine habitats and biodiversity, to provide living laboratories for doing scientific research, and to do these while avoiding significant economic impacts. So, what is a marine reserve? It's an area where all removal of marine life is prohibited, as is ocean development. And marine protected areas are adjacent to the marine reserves. And in these areas, ocean development is still prohibited, but some fishing activities are allowed. And the specific rules vary from site to site. Marine reserves and marine protected areas, or MPAs for short, are open to all non-extractive activities. So that includes things like boating without fishing equipment deployed, beach walking, surfing, and tide pool exploration. So here's a map of the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve. It's located between Manzanita and Cannon Beach off of the north coast of Oregon. It's about 20 square miles, and it has a no-take marine reserve, and that's in the red there, and then 2 associated MPAs. So the West MPA over here allows for salmon fishing by troll and crabbing. And then the shoreside MPA runs along Falcon Cove Beach here, and there, recreational fishing by hook and line is allowed from the sandy beach only. So the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve is adjacent to Oswald West State Park, which you can see here, and that's a 2,500 acre state park. And as such, it's part of an interconnected system of conserved ecosystems, which also includes the proposed rainforest reserve that the North Coast Land Conservancy is working on, which will be another 5,000 acres of conserved forest land adjacent to Oswald West. So, as many of you know, we have land-sea connections on the North Coast that drive many of our environmental processes, and having that conserved land and conserved ocean side by side really boosts the resilience of ecosystems on both land and sea. So, Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve, what do? We support the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife through outreach and education about the marine reserve. So the Department of Fish and Wildlife has a pretty limited capacity for these activities, and our role is pretty key. And actually at each of the marine reserve sites on the coast, there are friends groups that have been the significant forces for outreach in those communities. So we do our outreach and education through hikes, lectures, and boat tours primarily, and now also webinars. And we do research and monitoring, including ocean acidification monitoring with Oregon State University. And we've supported the development of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife's management plan for the Marine Reserve too. And we also organize community science projects in the Marine Reserve, which include supporting seabird monitoring with Portland Audubon. So here you can see some volunteer seabird monitors at our beautiful monitoring site at Devil's Cauldron in Oswald West State Park, which overlooks the Marine Reserve. We also work with Oregon State Parks, including developing a volunteer trail and beach ambassador program that we started last summer in collaboration with Oregon Coast Visitors Association. So our role in that partnership is to make sure that environmental stewardship messaging is a key part of the outreach. So the Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve includes local citizens and also representatives from local, state, and national conservation organizations. So it's really a team effort. And many of those folks are included on this slide. We also work closely with Lower Nehalem Community Trust, and they serve as our fiscal sponsor. Lastly, here is my contact info for any follow-ups. So if you are interested in learning more or getting involved with us or just joining our email newsletter, you can email me at the email address on this slide or visit our website. And without any further ado, I'm very excited to introduce tonight's speaker, Amanda Zimmerman, who is a naturalist with the American Cetacean Society. So she was a presenter on a hike we did last summer, and we were hoping to do something sort of similar this summer, but that's not happening. But I'm so excited to have her here remotely with us and to learn more about gray whales. So a little bit about Amanda. She has loved whales her whole life and has traveled all over the world. And she has lived in Portland for about 3 years and volunteered with whale watching spoken here on the Oregon coast, which many of you are probably familiar with. And she's also volunteered with Happy Whale, matching flukes from Tonga and Antarctica. And she just returned from working in the Antarctic Supply Department at McMurdo Station, supporting scientists and researchers there. So very excited to have you here. During Amanda's talk, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A, and I'll do my best to get them all answered. We will probably save them to the end, given the number of participants tonight, but go ahead and put them in whenever they occur to you, and I will save them up and pose them to Amanda. So I will now stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Amanda.
Awesome. Let's see, let me get this set up here. All right, awesome. So today we get to talk about our graceful giants, our beautiful gray whales that are just right off the coast here. Thank you for the introduction. My name, like she said, is Amanda Zimmerman. I'm a naturalist with the American Cetacean Society, only since 2019, but about 3 years ago, I decided to kind of change the way that I was living my life, and I started doing things that really aligned with some of my personal values. So I got more involved with some of these organizations, like Whale Watching Spoken here, Happy Whale, World Cetacean Alliance, where I could enjoy sharing more about whales with other people. So I am coming to you tonight with the American Cetacean Society. They're the ones that made it possible for me to be here with you tonight. They are a group focused on education, conservation, and research. They were also the world's first cetacean protection organization and founded in 1967. As I said, I'm a naturalist, so I will do my best to answer any of the questions that come up. I see some other people from the ACS are also here, so if we get into too much detail, I'm sure that they'll be able to help us out as well. And we look forward to being able to share all this information with you about cetaceans. So what are cetaceans? They are whales, porpoises, and dolphins. And what's really cool about Oregon is we have all of these right off our coast. We have minke whales, gray whales, humpback whales, fin whales, blue whales, sperm whales, orcas, Pacific white-sided dolphin, rhesus dolphin, Dall's porpoise, harbor porpoises, northern right whale dolphins, all kinds of cetaceans just right off our coast in our backyard. So it's really exciting to be able to talk today about the one that you're most likely to see if you go to the coast, which is our Eastern Pacific gray whale. Now these whales, while they are gray in color, they also had a researcher named Gray that worked with consolidating some of the different species. So whether or not they're gray whales after him or after the color, it might be still up in the air, but they are these beautiful whales that live right off our coast. When you look out into the water and you see a blow, about 80% of the time, that's probably from a gray whale if you're in Oregon. So That's the most common whale that you are going to see, or cetacean you're going to see here. Now, the gray whale is a mysticetes. That means it's a baleen whale. And one thing that I really love about Oregon is that we do have the really unique opportunity to see these whales from our shores. I have been at Fort Stevens and Depot Bay and all these places along the coast and been able to see without even binoculars these whales migrating. It's an incredible opportunity that really is quite unique in Oregon. So I've broken today's talk tonight into just some questions that I would think I would have if I came to learn more about these beautiful creatures. So I would want to know maybe like where they lived, so some of the distribution patterns, when are they going to be in Oregon waters, so some of their migration, how close do they actually get to shore, which is pretty amazing here in Oregon. What do they eat? You can see one here sucking up the mud at the bottom of the ocean there. What do they look like and how can we protect them? So those are some of the questions that we're going to really delve into tonight. So first off, we have what do they look like? So they are mammals. They are warm-blooded. They use lungs to breathe. They give live birth and they nurse their young. Their skin is going to be in like a mottled pattern with some white patches. And you can usually identify the different individuals by those patches. So humpbacks, we generally use the fluke or the tail, the bottom side, to be able to see some unique markings. With gray whales, you'll be able to see some of the unique patterns on each individual. They make sounds like clicks, grunts, and moans. So they have a very simple sound or simple sounds that they make in comparison to some of the more complicated songs you may have heard from humpbacks. And they're our slowest cetacean of all of our cetaceans. So they only go about 5 miles per hour, even though they do one of the longest mammal migrations in the world. So it's pretty incredible. Now, one of the really interesting things about that slow speed is it means that more more organisms actually can attach to them and live off of their body. As a result, they have things like barnacles living on them and whale lice. So these barnacles can get as big as like 5 centimeters, and the whale lice can get as big as like 2.5 centimeters. So here's some examples for you. At the bottom here, you can see some of these barnacles, and you can see these like reddish animals on there, and that's going to be your whale lice. They're eating that tattered skin around the barnacles. And actually, there's a individual I think that's pretty common to see in Oregon waters called Scarback, where he has a very distinctive scar, and it's very pinkish due to these whale lice. Now, I lived in Angola for about 4.5 years in Africa, and we had a lot of bats there that had parasites living on them. And when I see this whale lice, that's what it reminds me of, because I walked under the bat tree one day and something like this fell on me. And whenever I see that picture of the whale lice, that's what it reminds me of, is that parasite on the bat. So they're very, very interesting creatures. They're one of their unique features is that they have all of that life actually living on them. So unlike some of the other whales you might see, they don't really have much of a dorsal fin. They have more of a hump with these ridges behind it. That fluke is going to be, or that tail is going to be about 10 to 12 feet across. So it's really big. It's like 2 of me, right? Their head is around 1/3 of their body. Their flippers are going to be paddle shaped. They generally are going to live about 55 to 70 years. Now, one of the questions that comes up whenever we talk about whales, or whenever we talk about different animals, wherever I've been, has been how much do they weigh? For me, this has never been a question I asked, but a lot of people wonder this. So an adult gray whale weighs about 35 tons or 70,000 pounds. For me, that doesn't mean quite a lot. I like to compare that to things. So I looked up some comparisons. That's about half as heavy as a space shuttle, about as heavy as 5 T-Rexes, or about 15 rhinoceroses. So if that gives you a bit of an idea about how large these creatures are, they're very large. Now the babies are called calves. And the babies are about 11 to 1,500 pounds. So that's just a little bit more than a polar bear. And that's when they're born, they're about 15 feet or about the weight of a polar bear, a little more than a polar bear. So that is a very large cat. Calves take about 8 months to wean, and during most of that period, the mother will not have eaten. So if we also look at the length, I tried to find some things around Portland that would tell us a little bit about the length. And I think this mural is the closest I could get to about 45 feet. So 45 feet, the length of the gray whale is about 2 giraffes, about 9 Danny DeVitos, or 6 Shaquille O'Neals. So that gives you maybe a bit of a reference point. And the calves we said were about 15 feet. So that's actually about the length and the weight of a Prius. So that gives you a really good idea of the size of the calf, which is huge. So that gives us a little bit about the anatomy, about the makeup of the gray whales. So let's talk a little bit about where they live. So right now, the Eastern Pacific gray whale, so that's what we're talking about tonight, is the Eastern Pacific gray whale. As someone that's grown up on the West Coast, it's hard to think of anything being Eastern. But if we look at the ocean, we're on the eastern side of the ocean, right? Most of, or all of these whales are living in the northern hemisphere. So the furthest south they go down to Baja, California in Mexico. There is also a Western Pacific population that we know a little bit less about. There used to actually be an Atlantic population, but it died out sometime in the 1700s. There have been 2 sightings of gray whales over the last several years in the Atlantic. So it's unknown how those 2 rogue gray whales got out there. I believe one was in the Mediterranean and one was along the coast of Africa. So even in the southern hemisphere. So who knows how that whale got out there or what has happened to it since. The total population of Eastern Pacific gray whales is around 20,000. And all of them are going to be actually migrating, we'll look at that in just a second, down our coast. So all of those 20,000 whales are going to be swimming right by Oregon twice a year, right off of our shores. Now, we did have an unusual mortality event last year in 2019, where we saw a stranding of about 123 gray whales. So that's just a portion of the ones that actually washed up on shore. That doesn't necessarily tell us how many total were lost during that unusual mortality event. We also saw whales doing some unusual behaviors, such as having their calves in the San Francisco Bay, rather than making it down to their breeding grounds in Baja California. So concerning there. Now, some of the things that you may have seen about gray whales, and especially their breeding grounds there in Baja California, is that you can actually go out and see the mothers with their calves in Baja California. So this is definitely something that's been happening the last few years. It's quite interesting to me because this is an area that used to also be whaling, right? So we've transitioned with this species from hunting them in this area to now observing them and interacting with them in a positive way. So it's quite a change for these whales who were hunted through the 1800s and up through, I think the 1940s is the numbers that I saw, I think 1947. So these whales were hunted within the brink of extinction and have now returned to a population that's sustainable and healthy. So we have a picture here on the right of it in the breeding grounds, and on the left we have the Arctic, right? You can see the ice up there, and this is where the gray whales are going to be actually feeding. So all of this is super interesting, but when are they in Oregon, right? When are they passing by Oregon? Why do they go south and why do they go north? So the gray whale makes one of the longest of all the mammalian migrations, about 10,000 to 14,000 miles round trip, right? I always find this interesting. The Arctic tern is the one that I always think of that actually goes all the way from the Arctic to the Antarctic. It does 44,000 per year, so it's really hard to beat that. But the idea that the slowest moving mammal or the slowest moving cetacean going 5 miles an hour goes 10 to 14,000 miles a year. They spend 2 to 3 months going south and 2 to 3 months going north. This is an epic movement of these creatures. So in October, the whales begin leaving their feeding grounds in the Bering and Chukchi Sea and head south for their mating and calving lagoons in Baja, California. As we said, that takes about 2 to 3 months, and then the return trip takes about 2 to 3 months. The whales stay in these lagoons for about 2 to 3 months and allow the calves to build up that thick layer of blubber that helps to sustain them on that northern migration. These whales are not eating as they go down past California and into Baja, Mexico. So by the time they get down here, they calve, they have their babies, and then they head back up before they start to eat. And in Oregon, we do start to see them feeding. Now, like I said, they lagoons for about 2 to 3 months. The mothers and calves on the way back up, when the mother has her calf with her, she's going to stay close to shore. So one of the few predators that gray whales have are orcas. So the mother wants to try to protect their calf from the orcas who will feed on the calf. And so she is going to try to stay closer to shore. When they're heading south and they're maybe pregnant or individuals, maybe the male individuals, they're just going to be steaming by. They might not be quite as close to shore, but on that way back up, they're going to be really close to shore. And we'll talk about how close in just a few minutes. So you can even see on some of these whales, if you do have binoculars, or if you see some pictures of gray whales with rake marks, with actual teeth marks across the whale, you can see that that's an example of the orcas that maybe had attacked that animal. So they are going to feed primarily in the summer months in the cold Arctic waters of the Bering Sea and the Chukchi Sea. Now, I went ahead and took from a brochure that we have here in Oregon of the 24 best whale watching sites in Oregon. So here's an example of some of those awesome places you can get to on the coast to actually see these whales from shore. There is, I know I told you just now that they migrate during these periods of time, but there are about 200 individuals that seem to stay offshore at any given time. So just because we're not within that migration time, it doesn't mean that you're not going to see any. So still bring your binoculars or still go out and take a look and look for that flow. Now, I said at the beginning that I had volunteered before for whale watching spoken here, and I had some time out at Fort Stevens for that group. And that's not a place that I would particularly say is great whale watching because you're very close to the shore. You don't have like a high perspective. But even there, I saw several whales, and I saw one of the coolest things I've seen. I have like a little example of a gray whale here. I saw shark finning. So when gray whales eat, they're going to roll onto their left side and they're going to suck up the sediment, and we'll talk about how they feed in a few minutes. But when they do this sometimes and they're close to the top of the water, you can see the top of their fluke. So it looks like a shark fin, right? And I actually saw that at Fort Stevens. It was quite close, really cool. So the other thing when you're going out and taking a look for some of these whales, this aligns really nice with our spring and winter breaks for school. So if it is spring or winter break and you have kids, this is a good chance to go out and take a look at some of these sites. There's quite often some volunteers out during that time as well. So what can you expect to see if you go out? How close do they actually get to shore? So here's some examples of local places and how close they got to shore. Now this Cape Foul Weather one probably isn't fair. I did get these, I think some of these might be Eric's as well, but from the spout. And so this one's probably taken with a long lens because Cape Foul Weather is pretty high up. But this is how close they actually get to shore. This is Depot Bay. You can see here how close they are to these houses. So they get really, really close. We have these cliffs in Oregon that just make it really easy for them to come quite close. Now, what are you looking for? If you go out and you want to see a whale, what are the things that you want to look for to say, I have spotted a whale? So this is probably not what you're going to see. You're probably not going to see a breaching gray whale. Now, whales don't want to get hurt, so they're not going to, it's unlikely that they would ever fall into a boat. But the gray whales are not going to breach really frequently. What you're more likely to see are these. Their flukes or their tails out of the water, right? So this is a drawing of a humpback whale, but you don't have to be so judgy. What you're going to see is this little blow here, right? So just this little puff of water. Now, if the whale is facing you, that's actually going to be in a heart shape. So it's quite distinctive that it's a gray whale. But what you're most likely to see is this little puff of white. Now, if that puff of white stays in the same place, if that puff of white occurs every few seconds or maybe every 10 seconds, it's not a whale, it's probably a rock. So I know we get really excited about those rocks, but it would actually be moving. So we talked about that northern migration and that southern migration, right? So depending on the time of year, that whale is going to be booking it north or booking it south. And what you're going to see is this little puff. You'll wait maybe about 45 seconds. You'll see another puff. So they might take 2 to 3 of those before doing a deeper dive. They'll be down for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then you're going to see that pattern repeat. So when you're looking out there and you see a whale, you're going to look a little forward of that, a little further north or south, depending on the time of the year. So this blow is up to 12 feet in the air, very high, even though it'll look somewhat small. You might also see them spy hop. This is when they put their head out of the water. Breaching, as I said, isn't terribly common, but is not out of the realm of possibilities. Now, what you're most likely to see is this back. So maybe when they're doing a shallow dive, and they're usually going to show you their fluke or their tail when they're doing one of their deeper dives. They can hold their breath for about 20 to 30 minutes and then dive to about 500 feet. So let's talk for a minute now about what do they eat? What is it that these whales are eating? So at the beginning, I said that they were baleen whales. So these are mysticetes, they're baleen whales. So that means that they have baleen, they don't have teeth. So these plates of baleen are up on their upper jaw, and they're this off-white in gray whales. Not all whales have the same color baleen. So in gray, it's this off-white color. In humpbacks, I think it's black or kind of black. This is made up of keratin, just like your fingernails or your hair. So this is how that baleen or those baleen plates look up close. This is going to be what's going to be on the outside. Now, each of these individual pieces are plates. So a gray whale is going to have about 130 to 180 of these plates, and they'll have the 2 attached to their upper jaw. You can see here maybe their upper jaw. That's going to be about 2 to 10 inches long. Now in bowhead whales, that can be 13 feet long, really long. It's crazy. So in gray whales, though, it's just 2 to 10 inches. And so on the backside here, you can see how rigid these are. But on the inside, it's kind of like a comb, right? You have all of these fringes, and it's very thick. So it's like a really heavy brush that you might get at a hardware store. So this is the baleen that would face the inside of the mouth. So as I said, these whales are actually tend to roll onto their left side when they eat, and they're sucking up the sediment that's on the bottom of the ocean floor. That can even result sometimes in their left eye losing some vision. So they suck up this from the bottom floor, and then what they're doing is they're pushing all of that mud and water out of their mouth to leave these small creatures called amphipods, right? So these are only about the size of a piece of rice, these amphipods. Now they're eating about 2,400 pounds a day of these guys when they are eating. Now, any of you that have done any beach cleanups, I'm sure that you've seen how many nurdles and other items are actually out there on the beach, different plastics. So if you think of these animals sucking up that dirt, it must be very difficult for them to distinguish, if at all, whether or not they're getting some plastic stuck in their baleen as well. So here's an example of that beautiful gray whale sucking up that mud to eat amphipods. And so how can we protect them? What are some of the threats that we see to cetaceans? So we already talked about predation, about the orcas, right, that potentially prey or do prey on the calves. But we also have issues with habitat loss. We saw that they have a very specific area in which that they migrate up and down. So they have to be able to access that area and the feeding ground. So that's why places like the marine reserves are so phenomenal to help protect some of that habitat for our cetaceans. Another issue that affects a lot of cetaceans is entanglements. So getting tangled up in different types of fishing gear. Also boat and ship strikes. There's been some strange beluga activity, it seems, this year. There was a beluga spotted off of the coast of California. Very strange. But there's another beluga in the Arctic that has been very friendly. It seems to have been trained at some point, but is now on its own. And it's been very friendly with humans, but it was spotted today with a large, large gash that looks like it's probably from a boat or ship strike, right? So this is a really big problem for our whales that come up just for that minute to that surface. The other issue that we don't know if contributed to the unusual mortality event that we saw last year is starvation. So are they getting the food that they need? And then also noise pollution. So let's talk for just a second about pollution, about things that we can do as individuals to try to help these cetaceans out. With the quarantine and everything, I've been staying home most of the time, but as the beaches have been opening, I've been trying to do a bit of the Oregon Coast Trail each week. And while doing that, I picked up trash. So I've gone out about 6 weeks in a row, so about 6 days, and I picked up 88 pounds of trash. And that's from the jetty at Fort Stevens to Strawberry Knoll. So not a long distance, maybe 10 miles, and I've already found 88 pieces of trash from 7 countries. I found 2.5 pairs of shoes. I found a frozen Barbie, not that it was frozen, it was from the movie Frozen. I found 3 fluorescent light bulb tubes that had been immersed for a significant amount of time, a broom handle, lots of random things. So whenever you go to the beach, I've noticed too with the beaches opening, it's a lot more trash that maybe we're leaving on the beach than trash that is washed up. So make sure that you have an eye on your garbage, that you keep an eye on it. Maybe bring an extra bag to pick up anything that you see has been left behind. Reduce, reuse, recycle, and refuse. So try to reduce your consumption of items that could end up in our oceans. And then don't put hazardous waste down the beach. So those are the things that you can do to try to help look after our beautiful cetaceans that we have on the coast. As I said, I'm here with you today because of the American Cetacean Society. So one of the things that leads me to their site over and over again is their species fact sheets. So if nothing else, they're a great place to stop before you go out to the coast if you want to just kind of print up a 2-pager on what whales you might see and what behaviors you might be looking for. So it's a great site if you want to become a member or if you want to get some more information about facts on cetaceans or even some activities. They have activities as well. And we have a really wonderful group here with Joy at the ACS Oregon chapter, so you can look that up on Facebook as well. So I'll go ahead and hand it back to Margaret or find out what questions that we have.
All right, thank you so much, Amanda. That was fascinating.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have 3 questions waiting in our Q&A queue right now. And if anyone else has any questions, go ahead and type them in and we'll get them answered. So Cheryl asks, how many calves does the average female give birth to in her lifetime?
Yeah, I don't know that number off the top of my head, but they only have every 2 years. So about every 2 years. So that reduces the amount of time that they would have calves. But I don't know the total number or the peak of the total number that we do know for sure. But every 2 years.
Okay. Next up, we have Ted asking, how big are the whale lice?
Yeah, those whale lice are going to be about, let's see, they're going to be, try to get the right picture. There's the right picture. They're about 5 millimeters to 2.5 centimeters, right? So they're enough definitely to be able to see with the naked eye, especially because there'll be so many on individuals. And I believe on gray whales, they're one of the few species that have multiple types of whale lice because they have more than any of the others because they move so slowly.
Okay.
Ooh.
All
Let's
right.
see our next question.
Which one do you see?
This one from Cheryl. Are calves born with baleen? Since they nurse, wasn't sure if they grow later in like baby teeth in humans. You know, I can't tell you the answer to that. I don't know. That's an amazing question though, and I'm definitely going to find out as soon as I'm done today. And maybe we can leave it in the comments. I think you're going to put this up on the YouTube channel.
Yep.
So maybe we can leave it in the comments of the YouTube channel for people that are curious, because I'm definitely curious.
Me too. All right, the questions are pouring in now. So Mel asks, are the lice problematic for the whales?
People are excited about the lice now. The lice are not necessarily detrimental or beneficial. They're not hurting the whales, but they're not necessarily helping the whales. So I would say they're not really either one.
Okay. And Carla, hi Carla. Carla asks, do gray whales still go into Willapa Bay to feed on the shrimp?
Ooh, these are really great specific questions. I don't know the answer to that. I know that we definitely have people that do know that answer. So that's another one that we will add to the list to make sure that we get answered.
Okay, great. I will post those answers on our YouTube and on Facebook.
Great.
Let's see. So Natalie asks, are we more likely to see whales in Depot Bay when the weather is calm?
Yeah, so the whales, they don't really care about so much the weather that's going on at the surface. It's more that it's harder for us to see the blow if it's windy or if the weather is rough, right? So it's not that the whales aren't there just because we don't see them. It's that the weather may be inhibiting our ability to see the blow. So if it's really windy, the blow tends to disappear really quickly, which makes it really hard to see. Your best bet is going to be a day with low wind and clear skies, right? So that you can see a long distance and that wind isn't blowing out the blow. So on a rough sea day, I have gone down with the intent of seeing whales and could not identify a whale from a wave.
Okay, thanks. So we have a question from Elise. Hi, Elise. Thanks for joining us. How long does a calf stay with its mother? Do they
for about 8 months? Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. There's a follow-up then. So 8 months. 8 months.
Darn, that was easy.
Do they typically part ways in a certain area in their migration?
I believe it'll be maybe right before they head back south on their migration. So the calf will wean for about 8 months. And so if you think of that in terms of where they would be right back on that pattern of about to head south again.
Okay.
Now, since they are baleen whales, they tend to be more solitary. Baleen whales tend to be more solitary. So generally they're going to part ways and work as individuals at that point and just see each other in the breeding grounds and the feeding grounds.
Okay. I see that Joy from American Cetacean Society has given us an answer about.
Ooh, awesome!
Yeah,
perfect.
Thank you, Joy. So the calves are born with baleen, and
yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, and the mother's milk is very thick, like blobs of yogurt, and it's about 53% fat. It's very thick.
Yeah.
We have a couple of questions about your work in Antarctica,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically the kinds of whales that live there. But then also, I think it's just really interesting to find out how you did that, how you went and worked in Antarctica, and what you did while you were there. So.
Yeah, so in terms of the whales, I was trying to get a video actually for this, but I wasn't able to get my hands on of some of the minke whales there. So I was in McMurdo Station. So I think I have, let me just switch this real quick and I can kind of give you a better idea so you can understand why I only saw the whales that I saw. Awesome. So I visited the peninsula twice as a tourist and a guest, but this time I actually wanted to spend some time on the continent for a significant period of time. So I worked at McMurdo Station, which is out here on the Ross Ice Shelf. So this ice shelf's about the size of France, and this is just at the line between the permanent ice shelf and the open sea. So during the summer, this is open, but during the winter, all of it is closed. So on the peninsula, I saw humpbacks, I saw fin whale, I saw sperm whales, I saw incredible wildlife in the Antarctic Peninsula. But at McMurdo, because it's so far south, it does not have as much wildlife. So I went about 2 months before I saw my first bird. And I was very excited, and nobody else was very excited, but I was quite excited to see my first bird there, a skua. And as the sea ice started to break up, we started to get minkies and orcas. I didn't get to actually see the orcas, but I had seen them on the peninsula. The minkies are one of the few ones that go this far south, that go down here. And from what I understand, the ones here, about 2/3 of the females would be pregnant as well that were coming down here. So I did get to see minkies about every day that I actually went out and looked when the sea ice was open. So it was a beautiful chance to be able to get to see them. This is another view of Ross Island, the island I was on, which is completely covered right here on this section with ice. But let's see, I think we were right here. Yeah, right here. We could just see the whales here. Now there was a crew from BBC Frozen Planet there, and they were taking the helicopter to actually go out to the breaks in the ice to catch the whole orcas, to see the pods actually coming up for air along the ice breaks. And some of their footage was just incredible, and you'll be able to see that in Frozen Planet too. Let's see, I think there was one more question from Ted or Nancy about the noise pollution.
Yeah.
So noise pollution, just like we see here, where we're, inundated by noise, there's noise under the ocean too. So as we have more ships, sonar, different activity that's affecting our oceans, we're not, as far as I understand, we're not necessarily clear on all of the impacts that the noise pollution has on our cetaceans. But just like you would think of having a place that had like a jackhammer going or other noises going that you couldn't get away from, or that were in your normal working space, these animals have to deal with that noise pollution, which I believe over the last few months has kind of significantly changed. So it'll be really interesting to see if there's any studies on changes that have affected these cetaceans when the time that maybe there was less noise pollution.
Great, thank you. So how long is the gestation for gray whales?
I believe it's 10 months. I bet Joy will be able to get that cleared up for me. I love these questions though.
Yeah. And then did you or Joy hear anything about a gray whale that came to shore at Oswald West at Cape Falcon a few years back that was missing a fin?
I did not hear about that particular whale. Last year there were quite a few whales that were lost, so I heard more about those. see.
So Joy
So no.
says 12 to 13 months
Oh,
gestation.
look at that. Good job, Joy. Good
Thank
job.
you,
I'm so
Joy.
lucky you're here, Joy. We appreciate you.
And then Ketzel is asking for any pictures from your time on the peninsula, including whale pictures.
Yeah, I'm trying to look and see if I have any whale pictures. I do have a pretty cool picture here. This picture of my background, if you're seeing that, that's the Lemaire Channel. That's in on the peninsula. Let me see. There's this great picture that I have of a sea spider. So are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so this is a sea spider. So in other parts of the world, these guys are like the size of your fingernail. But in Antarctica, for whatever reason, they have like this gigantism. And so this is like the size of a dinner plate. And they're really, really unusual creatures in that they breathe through their legs. And their reddish color is because they hold their eggs in their legs. And they're just absolutely bizarre. They use these two shorter appendages to clean their legs so that they can continue to breathe. And what they do is they go up to another creature like a spider and they bite that creature and they suck out that creature's fluids or whatever. So they're kind of like a little vampire. I found these to be super fascinating. They actually had some that they were studying that you could touch. My biggest question that I had about these was, do they have eyes? Which they do. At the top of their body. We can't really see that here, but only the big ones can you actually see the eyes. So those were pretty fascinating creatures that I saw in Antarctica. But these are just some pictures of McMurdo Station. So as the sea ice started to break up, all this right here was actually open ocean. We had sunshine for the entire time I was there. So from October to February, it was sunshine every single day. Let me see if I can find a picture real quick of the ocean. I don't know if I have one of the whales. I think my whale picture, the other thing that was really incredible to see were the emperor penguins. I did get the chance to actually see an emperor penguin, as well as these are some of the Weddell seals. So these are one of the first animals that we were able to see in addition to the Adelie penguins. And so they look like little sausages out here, and they were actually having babies as well. So they were having their little babies out here. And this snow is quite fascinating as well, I guess, to me, because this is a cliff. So this snow looks very solid and everything, but a few weeks later, this was melted and was a cliffside. So it could be this is our Christmas celebration. But yeah, this is the galley that we eat at. Sunday, we had a really nice meal. But it really was an incredible place in terms of how beautiful it was and, really cool stuff going on. So this is an Ivan the Terrabus. This is the famous staple of Antarctica. When I got off the plane, it was negative 37 degrees. So this is just getting off the plane. And you can see as far as you can see is just white, just frozen white and cold. And on the ice shelf, it's just an incredible view of nothing. What looks like an endless expanse of nothing. It's stunning. I was lucky enough to be on the New Zealand Air Force's 757 on the way down and the way up, which meant that we had the absolutely incredible opportunity of having windows. So usually you'd fly down on a C-130 Air Force carrier and you wouldn't really have windows. So really, really awesome experience.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing those pictures. I think we've got time for maybe one last question, and this ties in to what you're just talking about, which is Kristen would like to know, what kind of education did you have to prepare you for getting involved in all these amazing things you're doing? So think about those students who want to know, or adults who might want to know how to do this.
Yeah, so, I've reinvented myself, I guess, a few times, if I could even call it that. But I actually went to school initially to be be a history teacher. Turned out it wasn't quite the right thing for me, and I landed in Lean Six Sigma, which is all about making our processes better, safer, faster, and more efficient. Essentially aligning our work process to what's value in our processes, what value is to the customer. As I became more passionate about that, I realized that what I was doing didn't align with my values. So I worked in oil and gas for about 10 years. And I decided that about 3 or 4 years ago, I wanted to do more that align my values with my day-to-day. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I started working on my MBA at Imperial College of London. That opened a lot of doors. I moved to Portland and I researched. I went online and I took a look at some organizations that were doing what I was passionate about, which was global whale research, with, not looking at the borders, but looking at our whales and how we can take care of them across all of our borders. So I reached out to people. I did different types of research. I think in Oregon, it's a bit difficult because we have so many awesome organizations out there that are doing cool stuff. And it's really just getting on the right lists and taking a look at what you can participate in and telling people what you want to do, right? So if you're really into birds, go to whatever event and tell people there, hey, what can I do more with the seabirds, right? And they're going to be able to help to give you some direction, because there is a lot of awesome volunteer opportunities in Oregon. You just have to, know the right people. A lot of them are quite local. So it's really asking around.
Great, thank you so much. And if people are interested in getting involved with the American Cetacean Society, what do they do?
Yeah, so we have our Facebook group. Let me go back here real quick. I'll leave it up at the end so that people can take a look at that. So we have the acsonline.org. So if you want to become a member, you can go there and do that. You can also take a look, like I said, at some of that curriculum or species fact sheets. And then if you just want to kind of follow along and get some more information, you can join the ACS Oregon chapter. That's a good spot too, to maybe check out news that's happening in Oregon about cetaceans, as well as, if there's more training that's going to be offered. That's, I think, how I discovered their training program, which to me was really incredible as someone that loves marine biology, that I essentially was able to take a marine biology course, having not a lot of background in that at the time.
Fantastic. So yeah, even for those adults out there who are interested in getting involved and maybe have different education or different experience, you too can get involved and work on these issues. So
yeah, and you bring your own unique perspective to it, right? So just because you don't have a background in cetaceans and marine biology doesn't mean that you don't have a perspective that's valid and important to share.
Yeah, exactly. And skills and experience that can be helpful. So
absolutely. Yeah. Definitely.
Fantastic. All right, well, I think we're going to wrap it up. If anyone's interested in Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve and getting involved with us, you can email me at capefalconmr@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at Cape Falcon MR, and you can also go to our website, which is nehalemtrust.org/Cape Falcon MR. So thank you so much, Amanda, for being with us tonight, and everyone in the audience for joining us. And if there's any last questions that didn't get answered, we will take those and do our best to answer them when we post the video, probably early next week.